So let's move on here to Drake Powell. Made that really easy for Coop there in the transitions. Drake Powell is going to be my biggest hear me out of the draft. This is a guy that and Stone, I'm just telling you, I am going to spend a lot of time giving the positive take here, and it will probably make me seem higher than I actually am. But I came away really liking Drake Powell and really believing that this is a guy that might be a potential steal because there's not a ton of hype here. There's not a ton of stats to back this or anything, but it's just this is my guy here, who I think is going to make an impact in the league, even though there's very little logical reason maybe that some would point to. But Drake Powell, listed at 6'6", he measured at the combine at 6'5" and a quarter, so about 6'6", maybe 6'6" and a half. He's an inch smaller than Thiero, with a 7-foot wingspan and an 8'7" standing reach. So he's kind of 2-3 sized. You could argue he could kind of play either in the league. This season as a freshman, he averaged 7.4 points, 3.4 rebounds, 1.1 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.7 blocks on 48.3, 37.9, 64.8 shooting splits. In 37 games, he only started 24. He came off the bench for a chunk in the middle, only averaged 25.6 minutes, was not given a ton of leash. 48.3% field goal percentage, like I said, with some kind of interesting advanced stats. Maybe the most damaging, he only had a 13.3% usage rate, but he'd have a 56.9 effective field goal percentage at 58.1 true shooting, 3.3 offensive rebound rate, 11.4 defensive rebound rate, 7.0 assist rate, 12.1 turnover rate, 2.8 block, 1.6 steal, only a 25.6 free throw rate, only dunked 10 times. Did shoot 69% on close twos, but only took 71. 37.8% on long twos, only took 45. 37.9% from three on 5.7 attempts per 100, but only took 95 total threes. Nothing, even free throws, low volume, 64.8, but only took 54. Everything is low volume for him. He was the fifth guy offensively for this North Carolina team. But the place to start here is the defense. And for me, I'm just going to start with my conclusion defensively and work backwards. I have some worry here that this is the type of defender that I personally love, but has lost some value in the league. His main weaknesses are contact absorption and physicality, which are like maybe the most important defensive traits right now. And it's tough to still be valuable without them. But the combo of length, motor, intelligence, and hand-eye coordination are enough for me to buy that there's real upside here if he can just put on weight. And, I don't think he's contact avoidant. He's just not very physical. He doesn't have it in him to be physical. But he is so smart. When you hear one and done, kind of athletic guy who didn't put up numbers, you think of a Terrence Ferguson, who Terrence Ferguson, I don't hate or anything, but he was not a particularly high field defensive player. I really, really like Drake Powell's consistency and discipline defensively. He has pretty swallowing length. The 7-foot wingspan he maximizes. He contests shots about as good as anyone in this class in terms of contesting jumpers. You're right up there with a guy like Carter Bryant. I probably even like Powell's contest on jump shots a little better than Carter Bryant's. He's really good at stunting, and he combines a really good ability to recover without ever getting himself like he doesn't have to recover early. He can stay fully in on a dig and then recover back out. The closeouts and the ground coverage in that way are pretty good. And he doesn't have to, even though I don't think he has elite change of direction, he doesn't have to get all the way out there to bother shots because he is so long and his timing is so good. He definitely makes some, big time defensive plays too, where he just in big moments, he just sees what the defense, what the offense is trying to do, and he reads it well. He communicates well. I think the motor's pretty good. He's rarely like disengaged or bored, even when playing for Team CP3, which was his EYBL team, where he was the dude, like he was their leading scorer and their second or third leading assist guy. He was constantly engaged and making plays on D. He is not the type of defensive player that is like super elite on the ball, but he's pretty good. The screen nav is okay, and the recovery ability is pretty good. Um, he's definitely more of a funnel and trust his length to contest guy than like an impose his will with his hips and his strength guy. He's kind of like the opposite of a Con Knipple, where Con is not like a great jump shot contester and he's not crazy long, but he's really good at using his strength to get guys where he wants them to go. Drake Powell is a little bit more reactive defensively, but he is solid at kind of forcing guys where he wants them to go, and then as they adjust, he will adjust. And if they try to get into jump shots or whatever, he's great at contesting that. The block and steal rates weren't great. To be fair, the steal rate, I think a lot of that is team context. He wasn't really empowered to go out there and make plays. The block rate being 2.8, when you consider that he was, playing as the three a lot on this and like a true three. That I like that. A lot of those were jump shots. 52 total stocks as a Frosh is solid. I don't know, Stone. Like, am I too high here? Where are you at with Powell defensively?
I don't think you're too high because I really like the defense too, and I think there's, in my opinion, like the best defenders are the super reactive defenders, the ones that can stick with you all over the court no matter where you're going, that have good anticipation. I thought he really did well with just getting his hands up and reacting to passes, even not even by jumping passing lanes, but he's just sort of within the range of the passing lane, and he sticks his hands out after the pass is made, and that's not a lot of time. That's like a half second or less to react to that, and he puts his hands out and he can grab them and start transition. I think the hips flip very quickly on the perimeter. Someone that is not going to get blown by very often, I feel like, relative to the frequency that a lot of perimeter players get blown by. I think that he's really times his stunts and digs well. He's not over ambitious, like someone else we will talk about or have talked about, depending on how this podcast gets released. But I think that he really times things well as a defender. It's not like he's just out there making crazy plays and roaming everywhere and a chaos creator. Like I think they're well thought out plays. Like he's anticipating things correctly. He's not putting themselves in dangerous positions to make plays defensively. And I think that's a really special trait that is not commonly found, especially for someone of his age. I think that the rotationally, he's extremely crisp. Like he almost never misses a rotation defensively as a help guy. That really stood out to me. He stays with drivers really well. He does a good job of like going all the way with drivers and then timing his contests at the rim, like as they're shooting. He's not just driving with them to the rim and then sort of staying vertical and waiting for them to get a shot up. He's like actively contesting it with his hands as they're putting the shot up after he sticks with them the entirety of the drive. There's just a lot of things to really like with him defensively that I think has the propensity to make him like a all defensive caliber type guy, which is might sound crazy for the range that he's being talked about, but like I think that he has that in him. Like he is that kind of defender, and at least on his higher end outcomes. And I think that That's a really special thing to have. We can get into the offense, which I think is really limited. I'll let you do
I,
that, but
I do want to I do want to stay on the defense for just a
yeah,
second. With pretty much all these guys, I'm using defensive comparisons because I do think that this is it's valuable. We talk about comparisons so much offensively, but I think it's valuable defensively because there's a lot of styles of defense. So with Nique, I talked about how I think he could potentially reach like an Aaron Nesmith level defensive ceiling in terms of that being the kind of defender he is. I think the guys with Drake Powell that stand out the most to me are Derrick Jones Jr. is a big one. Now, some of that is just the skinny frame and the length, but it's the ability to play above his strength level, his general awareness being better than people think. I think all those things are similar. I think there's a little bit of like Jalen Williams defensively in terms of just like his high level decision making and understanding
mm-hmm.
as an off ball guy. He's not the type of playmaker that like he's not like a Dyson Daniels, despite maybe some similar physical traits. But those are kind of the guys that I think are the most comparable here in terms of just what kind of defender he is. I'm not quite sold that he's like an all defense guy just because this is not often the type of defense that gets recognized for all defense. But what I do think he is someone who will be a very valuable playoff defender because he can guard, 1 through 3 fairly well without ever getting killed on switches. And he can execute different schemes. Like he can mix up what he's doing on a play by play basis. Not quite as well as like a Carter Bryant, but in that mold. And I think that he is just a really, his combination of intelligence and physical traits and motor to me is just really, really rare. And those are the types of guys that I think stick based mostly on their defense. Now, my one worry with him is I don't think he's quite like a full lockdown guy right now. Like he's not just like, you can't just put him out there on the other team's best player and say, okay, get the job done. He has to be a little bit more scheme, like fit into the right scheme, and that does kind of transition to the offense, which is a bit more of the worry. Stone, where are you at with him, just kind of overall offensively?
Yeah, I think for players like Powell in this sort of circumstance, it's important to kind of go back and rely on priors, right? Like whether that international or high school, in this case, high school, because they just didn't get really an offensive opportunity. Like he just, 13% usage. Like it's just, you can't really base an opinion off of that if they're only a freshman, especially, right? Um, so I think for me, like, and I don't have the time, unfortunately, nowadays to watch high school and college before these deep dives like I used to. In summer, I watched Drake Pell in high school, though, so I have somewhat of an understanding. It's just been a long time. But if memory serves correctly, I did like the decision making quite a bit with him. And that showed up in college, too, I feel like. He's just very decisive, and should have mentioned that with Thiero, too. He is decisive for his flaws, but both these guys are very decisive with the ball in their hands. Powell, I feel like, has really impressive shin angles as a driver, like some of the best that we've talked about, because he's just such a good athlete. He's not the strongest ball handler, and I am less concerned about that than I am with Thiero because he's, first of all, much younger, but also I buy Powell's shot a lot more. I think that it's he's got a real flared elbow. He's kind of stiff, but those are both like pretty fixable things. In the touch, I feel a lot more confident in, and I think that he will translate to being a really good catch and shoot 3-point guy. And it might not happen in year 1 or 2, but I feel like fairly early on in his career, he's going to become a reliable catch and shoot guy. I think that he is a strong transition scorer. because he gets out and leaks so quickly. And this happened like a lot. And I think part of it was at UNC because he just didn't get a lot of shot opportunities. He kind of wanted to find a way to force himself to within the offense, and that led to him becoming and developing really good transition skills of being someone that recognized as soon as where the ball is coming off, and if he's not close enough to get the rebound, he starts leaking because he sees the ball is going to one of his teammates, and he can start leaking out already before his teammate even gets the rebound. And I think it really helped him keen in on a lot of these little things that made him a really special transition player. Not necessarily as the guy that is initiating the transition as the ball handler or the passer, but the guy that is finishing in transition. And I think that that's a skill that is very translatable and impressive that he developed at the age that he did. But as sort of some of a silver lining within the offensive hierarchy that he was put in. But I think outside of the catch and shoot stuff, outside of the transition stuff, there's not a lot I bank on. But I do think that those two things paired with the defense, and like you said, he has to get more physical, and I think he will. Like just looking at his frame, if you're watching on YouTube, which you should be, the frame that he has is like really conducive to putting on some muscle mass. I feel like it's already really toned, but I think he has the shoulders, he has a strong lower body already, and I think he can add more muscle and weight to be even more impactful there and in transition. So I think even with just those two things, I buy the shooting as a catch and shoot guy. I buy the transition play, which should translate into fourth or fifth option offense as like a cutter, finisher at the rim with what I saw in transition. So just those things alone, to me, paired with the defense, makes him a pretty special prospect in terms of the higher end outcomes. And I think we have, or we will talk about this with Carter Bryant, but like if you're a really good defender, I feel like you just need enough to get by to become like a winning player in basketball. And I feel like Powell has enough to get by. And the skills are still pretty, they're still helpful, like being a shooter and a transition guy, but he's not, going to be someone that's handling the ball a lot, I don't think, even though I wouldn't rule it out. But I just think the bar is lower for those guys to be super skilled offensively when you're already a really good defender.
Yeah, so for the first thing I want to start with is the finishing. This year is 9 for 10 on dunks, 84th percentile on 66.7% effective field goal rate at the rim, only 75 attempts, but 63.1% on layups. 6 of his dunks were in the half court, and he actually shot better at the rim in the half court than in the full court. There are a couple times where he ran into some big bodies in transition. In EYBL, he was 14 for 15 on dunks, 79th percentile on 62.8% effective field goal percentage at rim. Now, he did shoot way worse in the half court and pretty poorly on layups kind of overall, but there was 102 attempts there, still in the 79th percentile. I think the things that stand out the most to me with him, I think he has a really good first step, like a really blinding first step at times, like especially off of his Paul George stutter rip move. It's there, Jimmy Butler, I should say, not Paul George stutter rip move. It's a thing of beauty when he really gets it going, and he can get someone off, and he just blows by him. There's some really, really good stuff there, and that's the type of thing that translates to the NBA because people don't realize this all the time. But in the NBA, like everyone will get every once in a while where they just kind of have to go do something, and especially during the regular season. And the fact that I think again, Powell was the guy on his EYBL team, and that's a team with a guy a lot of people really liked with Isaiah Evans. And Powell was a way higher volume scorer. Now the jumper is weird because it has a pretty pronounced hitch. It was pretty clearly something that he took a lot off the dribble because he likes to hang in the air and then bring it down. It's kind of a thing you do naturally. Like if you go to the gym and you just like take like a bad mid-range shot and you jump as high as you can, naturally you'll kind of like double clutch it. And that's where that hitch comes from. Like in his shot, he'll bring it up, get it to a set point, and then drop it before going back into it. And so that excess motion, I think, hurts him. But he shot it well this year. And I do think there is something to be said for the fact that, he takes a lot off the dribble. In EYBL, he was in the 60th percentile on 73 catch and shoot attempts, 45.9 effective field goal percentage, but took 69 dribble jumpers. This year is in the 11th percentile on 28 dribble jumpers, but the 81st percentile on 93 catch and shoot shots. I think despite there being a hitch, like he's already a pretty solid jump shooter, and I think it's something that is fairly easy to be worked out. Now, I don't think he's ever going to be elite, but the fact that he has okay footwork, that it got better over the course of the year. Like as you watch him improve over the course of the year, the jumper looked more and more comfortable, more and more confident. To the extent that in clutch time of certain games, they were running plays for him to get threes. That matters to me. I think there's some obvious like whenever something an improvement for a jumper is this obvious, that's kind of a good thing. It's tough when it's like, man, this guy shot horribly and everything kind of looks fine, so I don't really know what's going on. No, that's not it with Powell. He shot okay, and the issue is that there's a gigantic hitch at the top of it. How good are NBA shooting coaches at getting the hitch out? It just depends. And he's probably going to be fairly reliant on finding a situation where that's the case. But if he finds that situation, I imagine he's going to be a completely competent spot up shooter. I don't think he has a ton of movement equity, though he does. Like he can take some off the dribble. Again, he took a ton in EYBL, 69 dribble J's. He was not very good at them. He does not have a ton of like handle shift. He has a really good first step and some okay like hard deceleration, but he doesn't have like a ton of shift to create space or angles. He's just kind of he loves his little turnaround fade, which is not a good shot for him, not something he should take much in the NBA. What his game should be built around is making catch and shoot shots, and then when someone closes out, using that first step to get by them and then finish off 2 feet in the rim. He's a pretty rough 1 foot finisher. So when he goes left, he always wants to try and do a 1 foot extension, kind of loopy finish. And when he goes right, he always wants to get to 2 feet and kind of hang with the ball. And he looks way better going to that right hand. He's not contact seeking, but I don't think he's crazy contact averse offensively. He's just not. I wish he was a little bit more. I'm not saying he needs to be Thiero and just be crashing into dudes, but I wish he was a little bit more aggressive, seeking contact sometimes. That free throw rate being that low is probably my biggest overall concern with him. But I think there's a path to being a pretty good finisher. He's a 2 foot leaper, 2 foot finisher, real ability to hang. So that I think that Powell has a real path to being a passable offensive player who is a very good defensive player. And for me, that's a guy I'd probably consider at the back end of the first round. I haven't fully decided where I want to have him. He's definitely going to be below Thiero and above Liam McNeely, but I haven't decided if I want him in that tier with Thiero or that tier with McNeely. I think the lack of upside is probably leaning me a little bit lower, but I like the skill set, man. This is a guy I'd be pretty happy to take in the back end of the first round, especially if I get him in the early second. I'd be ecstatic because I think he is going to be an NBA player. And there's really only in any given draft about 20 guys that I want to confidently point to and say that is an NBA player. And I think Powell is one of those guys. And I think that makes a pretty big difference for me in a way that I can't do that with a lot of guys right now. So Drake Powell, this is my out on a limb guy, but I really like him, and at a certain point, your board is about taking guys you like, especially if again, we're not doing team context where I'm thinking like, if I was a team where I knew he'd be a bad defensive fit, like if we were gonna have to play him at the 4, or he was gonna have to be like a free safety. I would know not to do that. But if he can be on a team where he can play as a 2, 2 or a 3, and he can do some switching, and we can really maximize him as like a nail and recover guy, as a put him on a team's second best wing scorer or second best overall scorer, and let him just kind of keep that guy out of a game. I think he's really, really good. Another defensive comparison could be like he could be like a McCall, who McCall Bridges is now, where he's not like a lockdown guy, nor is he like a crazy event creator, but he's just good, and he's always in the right place, and you're never ever going to attack him. Drake Powell gives me those vibes, so I'm pretty in on Powell, even though I understand, he's definitely, he has way less star equity than basically anyone else I'm going to have in the first round, other than maybe you could say Carter Bryant. But I think the skill set's valuable. I still like my quote unquote 3-and-D guys. I can't quit them. So Powell is a guy I'm in on. Stone, where are you at with Powell?
Yeah, for me, Powell is a first round lock. Like, this is someone basically every year I'm taking in the first round. In this year specifically, it's probably a bit higher because I don't have a lot of guys that, and I'm actually a bit of the inverse of you, where I think there is some star equity here where I didn't with Thiero. Like, for me, I think Powell has like more of a star outcome than Thiero does. I think that he can be a really like all defensive caliber defender, who that I like the handle more than Thiero right now. And if it becomes just good enough to be able to get himself to the rim, not even as a playmaker or anything, because we haven't really seen that from him even in high school, but he is a really good connective passer. He has the connective tissue that Thiero lacks, I feel like. He's always making the extra pass, the right pass. Like, he's not necessarily creating anything. He's not looking to get his players in better positions than they already are, but he is finding the right decisions to make as a passer, or whether to pass or drive. Like, he's not someone that's looking to always consistently drive to the rim like Thiero, and I think that is a big separator, especially at this age, right? Like, he's significantly younger, and I think that timeline allows for the handle to be better, for him to make reads as someone that can get downhill and then make the right reads. He's not a complex passer, and he never probably will be, but if he can get downhill and make the right reads, that's a big thing. And I think there's star equity with that. Like, I think if he becomes a pretty good catch and shoot guy, if he becomes someone that can get downhill on his own, and be a connective passer, and be a really good finisher, like all those things combined with the really good defense, like I think that could lead to all-star outcomes with him. And for me, it's a risk. You're taking a big projection jump in comparison to what we saw on film and what he produced, the productivity that he was allotted at in college this year. But for me, like, there's not a ton of star outcomes in this class, or even all-star outcomes, and I'm willing to take that bet with Powell. It all comes down to where you want to take that bet for him, because for me, he is kind of a risk when you're talking about what he produced, but you're taking a projection leap with him, and I feel comfortable doing that in this class right now. I have him at 14 on my board, so right at the back end of the lotto. He's not a lotto caliber guy for me. That's just where he falls numerically on my board. But he is a first round lock for me. And I think that there's a lot to like with him, and there's a lot of projection. I totally get that. But at the same time, there's not a lot of guys I project to have the kind of outcomes that Powell does. And so I'm going to take that risk a lot higher than I think a lot of people will. But I'm okay with that. Even if I miss, like I'm happy with the process I have behind putting Powell there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the truth is, Powell is one of these guys that's going to be fairly dependent on finding the right situation, and that's always a fraught thing. So I'm with you. I think that this is a guy that the truth is he made a really bad decision. He went to North Carolina. If he had went to another school, I think we would be talking about him as a more comfortable first round guy. He actually kind of reminds me a little bit of what happened with the two, the BJ Boston Terrence Clark duo at Kentucky. But the difference was those guys were given the reps to play in a role that they should, and Powell was hidden by a bad context, in a similar but different way to Carter Bryant. And I don't begrudge him too much for that, because I think that he would have been fine in a lot of different schemes. Another thing I didn't mention, but I just think he's really smart overall, and I do think that matters because while I think he's more of a 3-and-D guy, I don't think he is like a ball stopping, stick him in the corner every possession 3-and-D guy. I think he can like make plays as a passer, not a live dribble passer, but he is a pretty good. He does a good job reading the floor before he catches, and I think his ability to potentially contribute to offense on both ends contribute on both ends is a valuable bet. So, anyways, that's all we got. We hope you guys enjoyed this pod. Again, shout out to Cooper Klein and everything he's doing. I know you guys heard him on the first half of the podcast, but you guys did not hear him in this YouTube video. So tell us what you think. Drake Powell and Adou Thiero with Nique Clifford and Carter Bryant. This was a fun group. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications so you know when we're dropping. It's draft season, baby. It's the draft month as you guys listen to this. It's officially that time. So I hope you guys are locked in. This has been the Upside Swings NBA Draft Podcast. We hope we hit our ceiling. Thank you.